Welcome everyone to today's Fat Talk. Food loss and food waste is an emerging issue in our region, leading to urgent implications on the economic, social, and environmental aspects. Approximately a third of the food produced worldwide is being wasted. This poses a critical challenge since food loss and waste occurs along all the food value chain from production to consumption. Also, food loss and waste is a nutritional insecurity concern as it can affect the availability of food for consumption. As such, action to combat food loss and waste is gaining steam, especially in terms of making the food systems sustainable and anti-fragile. To further discuss food waste reality, challenges, and opportunities in the region, I'm happy to welcome with me today Dr. Mohammed Abyad, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences and Director of LEAF, Laboratories for the Environment, Agriculture, and Food.
Hi,
Mohammed. And thank you for being with us today. Food waste is such a huge issue in our region. Actually, you corrected me earlier. You told me we never talk about food waste without tackling food loss as well. So actually, what's the difference between food loss and waste?
Thank you so much first for having me. There is a big difference between food loss and food waste. Food loss is whatever has been lost throughout the production phase throughout the supply chain until it reaches the consumer. So once it reaches the consumer, it's no more a food loss if we lose it. Now it reaches the consumer, it was intended for consumption. So at that point, it changes from food loss to food waste. Okay. So food waste is up in the chain when it reaches the consumer, intended to be consumed, but ends up not being consumed. Okay. That can be due to expiry dates, the shape of the fruit or the vegetable that reached the consumer was not acceptable.
Excess preparation of food maybe.
Excess preparation of food, that is part of the waste. Well, the loss is during harvest, post-harvest, in the production, in the manufacturing processes, that's all that. And then for the food loss, we have two components, the edible component and the non-edible component. So that also adds to the complication of classifying food loss versus that.
I always wonder when we reach the stage of the retail shops or supermarkets and losses that occur at the shopping centers, if we may say that. What is it? Is it a food loss or a food waste?
That's a good question. Actually, that's a food waste. It's not a food loss anymore because it reached the end toward the end of the supply chain. So that part becomes a waste rather than a loss. Because it's now intended, prepared, ready for consumption, but unfortunately it would have
got wasted. Okay. So again, when we talk actions, we also talk actions about food waste at the shopping centers or at the retail shops.
That's true. Well. And there are a lot of food waste at the retail stores because these retail stores want to keep their stores, their shelves full so that the consumers can buy. If they see an empty shelf, nobody will buy anything. So keeping the shelves full, that's close to expiry, not having promotions, and with all these crises around the world, you'll have a lot of waste rather than
wasted food. Yeah. Okay. Now, when we usually talk about sustainable development goals, SDGs, I mean, every time and during every Fat Talk, we mention one of the SDGs. Where do we see the relation between food waste and loss among the SDGs?
Well, SDG 12.3 actually addresses food loss and food waste at the same time. It's projected by 2030 that the world would have the food loss and food waste being generated. Okay. But then doing that, it also, if we mitigate food losses and food waste, what we are actually doing, rather than just addressing SDG 12, which is sustainable consumption and production, meeting the food loss and waste reduction target would improve sustainability of the food consumption, we actually address 70% of the other SDGs, ranging from SDG 1, no poverty, because we're reducing the losses, you'll have more food available, to
For the
feed more for
population.
the population. You'll reach the goal of SDG 2, which is zero hunger. Then because you are providing more food, healthier options, you go to SDG 3,
Which
and
is
then
good health.
SDG 4, quality, gender equality, because then you are reducing unnecessary household spending on food, so that money can be spent on health, can be an education as well. SDG 6, clean water and sanitation can be addressed with that. Decent work and economic growth, because farmer income and prosperity can be increased. And that, because we reduce the farm losses because that's food loss, right? So we address that. You can address SDG 11, where you have sustainability in cities and communities as well. So then SDG 13, the climate action, right? Reducing food loss and waste, reduces the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, so that you are affecting the climate and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and the footprint, and life underwater, because reducing that means reducing the bycatch. For example, if we're talking about fish, you don't want to catch more, you want to spare that. So wasted food uses significant amounts of fertilizers that end up also in lakes. So that is part of life underwater. You're affecting that with the pesticide. So you addressing the food loss, you're reducing that. And then life on the land, reducing food losses and waste also reduces the need to convert more natural ecosystem into cropland or grazing pastures. So it's one SDG that combines
everything,
almost everything in the sustainable goals.
Exactly. Now, we know that this is, I would say, food waste and loss or food loss and waste is something that we're not used to in our region. I mean, we are known, the Arab population, we're generous, we provide a lot of food to our households, to our guests. So what are the challenges when we're talking food loss and waste in the region?
Well, that's a good question, actually. The culture plays a big role. If you look at the food loss and waste in the Western or developed countries versus developing countries, and this region in specific, you'll see that the number one country that wastes food is Saudi Arabia. And then you have, for example, Palestine comes number 14. You've got Egypt comes in number 9. So because of the culture and the giving and the generosity, we usually tend to waste more. So we lead
without meaning to, of course. But this is, as you said, in our culture.
Although, if you look at the religions, they all say you should not waste
food.
So and you should be more. Generosity and wasting are two opposing.
Opposite.
And even dining out. We had a study about dining out and food waste in restaurants. When you look at Mediterranean cuisine, if we want to look at that cuisine, and you want to look at sharing meza type of food, you'll see that the waste can go up. It ranges between 80 grams per person per meal, up to 250. Sometimes it reaches 350 if we want to go to the upper range. So there is a lot of waste in meza type restaurants where people share and then they fight over who's going to eat the last bite, right?
So and who's going to pay?
And who's going to pay? So that's a lot of waste generation.
So do we have any baseline values? Do we know? Have we ever measured food waste or food loss and waste in the region? In the Arab region?
Unfortunately, the only country that did an extensive study to have a baseline on food waste is Saudi Arabia. They just finished a study last year on developing the baseline for food waste. And that will help them to develop policies. All the other countries, it's including Lebanon and in the region, but especially Lebanon, we don't have any studies that give us a baseline. Now, developing or coming up with the baseline in order to be able to combat food waste can be done at different levels. You can do real measurement by weighing the food waste, and you take a sample, a representative sample from the community, and then you do all that. So that's the highest level by weighing at the household levels. And then you can do a lower level study, which gives you around 50% error, if you want, and that's by filling diaries, asking people to fill a diary over a whole week. And we did that study for Beirut, and we do have some numbers that have been published. But that gives us only a 50% approximation on the food waste and food loss. Because people then, towards the end of the diary, they start like unintentionally, they start decreasing their food waste. Okay, because they realize that how much they are registering in the first few days. So that gives it a little bit of a bias. But then you can do questionnaires and you can do all that. But unfortunately, we don't have a base. So in order for us to combat reduction or mitigation of food waste in Lebanon and the area, we don't have any baseline to say, okay, 50% is what? Of
exactly.
what? And whatever cannot be measured or is not measured cannot be corrected.
So one challenge is that we don't have a base, and a second challenge is that we don't know. It's not possible to measure.
It is possible, but it is an expensive study to collect data. Yeah, collecting data is expensive, and unfortunately, there are not much grants to do that.
And we talked about the challenges. I'm afraid to ask about the solutions.
Well, solutions can differ. It can be from the household level, creating awareness campaigns, for example, teaching about expiry dates. Food waste is also about expiry. So people buy goods that says best before or consume by, and then they just don't know what that means. That means that maybe an awareness campaign should say, like, you know what, best before means that the quality is preserved, but safety-wise, it's still good if you consume it. You don't need to throw it. You might give it to somebody who really needs it, so you don't waste it. And then the expiry dates should be better explained to the consumers. That's at the supermarket. Also, encouraging people to buy ugly food. There is a supermarket in Europe that tells or encourages customers to buy ugly food, right? And then they pay for it. It does not look good, but it tastes the same. And these can be used for kitchens, community kitchens to distribute, and all sorts of. Now the food bank is doing something around that. In every country now in the region, they have food banks which take those ugly foods and process them
or near the end
expiry. But come on, if we want to talk about the canned food is sterilized. It does not expire, so it's only the quality that goes down. So it is still safe. So you see food banks in the US and in Europe, they collect those expired cans, if you want, but they redistribute them to the needy, because technically the quality is less, but their safety is still good.
Safe to consume. Now the issue, because you mentioned the expiry dates, the issue in our region is that there is, you don't see, or in Arabic, there is not an exact terminology for safe to consume or use by. So this, it's like تاريخ الانتهاك, and that's it. So what does it mean? Does it mean, is it
الصلاحية? انتهاء الصلاحية, which is expiry date.
Exactly, but we need to know and understand or ask so that there are some legislation that says we have to, when to use the تاريخ الانتهاء and use by or expiry date. So this is again confusing for the consumer.
Is very confusing. And it is confusing. Another way to combat food waste is to educate the servers or the hostess and in restaurants. And to tell them, like, if clients over ordered, he can tell them, he can educate them, say, you know what, this is, you are like 3 or 4, you have over ordered. Would you like to reconsider the quantity that you have ordered?
That is not okay.
That's not okay, and culturally is not okay. But that's something also to consider.
That's not okay for the business as well.
That's not okay for the business, but then it's okay for the environment, and then you are trying to target. But that, if we have that waste, then there are also other ways that you can do, that you can recycle them.
Or take home.
For example.
And again, in Lebanon and the region, I see many persons, at least when I go out with my friends, they are reluctant to take home the leftovers.
Because they are shy that people will look say, why are they taking these boxes with you?
Exactly.
You know? So, and still, it's a cultural thing. And I think that can be addressed. And
again, with the
it
whole
will be so,
awareness campaign.
With this, even if restaurants do have excess food waste, we've worked on a couple projects in my lab with graduate students to address and recycle those food waste once they have been generated. So we worked with two food processing companies.
Okay.
One of them that makes orange juice, and the other one that peels garlic. And what we did, we took the waste from the orange and the garlic, and we created plates.
Plates, wow.
Because if you want to compost, okay, compost is one way to do that,
yes.
but oranges, you cannot compost them. They are high in acid and they're not good. You cannot give them as animal feed. We'll talk about animal feed in a minute. So they cannot be, they're not edible by animals because they are high in essential oils, acidic. So we decided that why not recycle them into something that can be useful. And what we did is we tried to formulate, and we have a formula, and this is all made from recyclable waste from an orange plant, a garlic peeling plant, and actually we created also a coating so that it becomes waterproof. And that coating is from recycled beeswax from honey processor. So we combined all those into one product. We also worked on another product with a couple restaurants that serve meza and Lebanese food. We analyzed the food and we looked at the nutrients and we looked at all those, and we found out that there are many studies that have been done, okay, to be able to convert food waste, okay, into animal feed.
Into feed.
So what we did is we looked at Lebanese food that has been wasted, and we decided that why not analyze it and see the composition. So we were able to create fish feed.
Wow.
So we created fish feed, which we are using to feed our fish in at Arik, and we have grown about 1.5 tons this year.
From leftovers of
from
restaurants.
using leftovers of restaurants, and then
so how many restaurants are in with the
we
this
worked
project?
with actually 4 restaurants.
And usually
so
these are leftovers of hummus, of tabbouleh.
So it's a plate food waste. What we call it, it's plate food waste. And we did 2 studies on saltwater fish, rabbit fish, which is muwasta in Arabic. And we did it on tilapia, which is a freshwater fish.
Okay.
And we were able to replace 50% of the conventional feed with food waste-based ingredients.
So if you would like, we can see the video.
Yes, of course we can.
It explains more about this project.
I'm Mohammed Abyad. This is Patrick Saoud and Bridget Ireland from the American University of Beirut, and we are part of a team working on building resilient food security systems.
The problem we're trying to solve here is actually feeding the next 2 billion people we're going to have in the world in the next 30 years. The main issues for these are we don't have enough water, we don't have enough land, and we waste too much of the food that we actually do produce today. So our project is to integrate all together to make our water more productive and use the wasted feed to produce nutritious human feed. Traditionally, producing a kilo of wheat requires about a ton of water. This is groundwater that is being used very inefficiently. So part of our project is to pump water from the ground and grow fish in it and then use the fish water to irrigate. This actually improves water productivity very much. We now have, with every ton of water, about 15 kilos of fish and that kilo of tomatoes that we used to produce before. Additionally, we take the part of the 40% of the food produced in the world that is wasted today, and we recycle it, we remanufacture it, we produce fish feed, and we give it to our fish. So now our fish are growing out of wasted feed or wasted human food, and our plants are being irrigated by water that has already been productive. This reduces our water footprint, our CO2 footprint, and produces much more food per unit area of land. Hopefully this will help improve the food situation in the world.
The impact of our project really focuses on marginalized communities, women in rural areas, as well as refugees in many countries. The impact of our project can be measured by different indicators, including socioeconomic, improvement in livelihoods, nutrition, and health.
That's amazing, Muhammad. Really, this is excellent work, especially in our region. And before we wrap up, just few tips for us consumers at our household level. What can we do at our level? How can we educate our children to waste less food?
Well, there are a lot of things that we can do at the household level and even when dining out. So when dining out, well, let's not over order.
Yes.
Always consume everything. If you cannot consume everything, take away.
Take back.
That's
take back home.
Take back home with you. Take away or carry out boxes. We should not shy out of that. Actually, in other countries, like in France, if you have any leftovers, you pay extra.
Oh,
if you don't, you pay a tax for leaving leftovers.
If
you don't take it away with you, or you don't consume it and everything, you leave on your plate, you pay a tax on that. And other countries are starting to implement such similar policies. Developing a policy at the governmental level toward that extent is really a trigger for people to stop wasting while dining out. While at home, we should not shy out from buying ugly products if we want to use them for cooking, because in the cooking it's going to be mushy and it's going to integrate with all the other ingredients, and especially if you're making stews and all that. You don't really care about the shape. So that's something we cook leftovers. If you have leftovers from several dishes, also you can combine the ingredients, create some other food items,
some other recipes.
Eat some other recipes.
Be creative.
Be creative, right?
Yeah.
Also, preparing a list when going shopping. That's very important, because people tend to go shop, and then once they reach the supermarket, they see items and what they call it impulse shopping. So they see an item, even if they don't need it, because it's on sale, they buy it. But that's not.
And there's the big issue of the offers. So you would think that you're paying less for a product, but it ends up not consumed. That's the main issue when people, or in the supermarkets, when you need to buy 2 cans of tomato paste for the price of 1, and it ends in the garbage.
Expired in your cabinet, and you just throw it away.
Exactly. So finally, for wrapping up, what would be your last message for today's topic, food loss and waste in the region? What would be your...
Waste less or recycle it. Let's save the environment, and that's basically we can help. And be creative with innovative ideas about what to do with this waste is also gives an opportunity for new startups, and that would help build the economy in Lebanon.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Abyad. Thank you all for joining us today, and stay tuned for our future FED Talks.